Beautiful Scarred Soul, Chapter 7, by Ohbear. Days yawn by like years, and there's nothing but the musk of Sangwoo's fading scent and his slicked sweat coating his body. Sangwoo hardly comes down anymore, and Bum is lonely without him. He had tried to be defiant in the beginning, to convince Sangwoo that he would be better, but his acts of persuasion left him with long scratches down his nape. Bum can't help but get excited when he hears the door open, and the weighted steps traverse down the stairs and the feathery humming as Sangwoo thumbs his touch along the curve of an apple. Bum, in anticipation, in his state of hunger, obediently opens his mouth and sticks out his tongue, as Sangwoo had previously directed. But he feels nothing touch his tongue. Bum can only assume Sangwoo is still there, and he awkwardly fidgets in the cage and manages to rub his blindfold against the bar to itch his eyes in uncertainty. The next thing he knows is that a fiery touch of a strong hand is grasping his jaw and slamming it upwards. Bum cries out in pain, and blood leaks from the shallow wounds formed in his tongue, and he can hear Sangwoo's chipper coo tickling his shoulder. I told you to use manners, didn't I? And only bad pets don't use manners. What should you have done? I should have said please. Bum whimpers, voice hoarse from his lack of fluids. And what else? Please, master. Good. Now learn to fix your errors, and maybe next time you can eat. Sangwoo hums with delight, the sound of his teeth sinking into the apple sending shivers up Bum's spine, and in an instant, Bum is alone again. A routine had formed. Every other day, at what Bum believed to be the crack of dawn, Sangwoo comes down into the basement with a single apple, and Bum practices the same pattern, opens his mouth, sticks out his tongue and begs for his forgiveness. A forgiveness that in Bum's mind he should have already had. It didn't matter anyhow, Sangwoo was just as gentle as he had ever been when Bum followed the strict routine. Just as quick as Sangwoo appears, he vanishes 2 times quicker. A familiar ache of disrepair begins to settle like a cancer in Bum's stomach, and he knows with every parasitic cell of fear that this is who he is without the touch of Sangwoo, without the love of Sangwoo. And it briefly crosses his mind that this is what Sangwoo wanted, but then again he'd be a hypocrite for saying he didn't want Sangwoo in the same way, if only more docile. These thoughts play in a simplistic carousel of what could be, what was, and what will be. An occasional twitch of skin rises on his shoulder, but when he touches it there's nothing there. Hives explode across his spine, and he claws at his flesh as if he were to expect insects to be unfurling from his hand. There's a foreign presence in his solitude. Bum's world was etched in charcoal, and he longed for the blinding light that radiated from Sangwoo's brilliant smile. He finds himself yearning for the blazing touch, the smouldering burn, the pure ecstasy of belonging that he only felt when Sangwoo was looking at him with a galaxy of nothing but everything at once in his eyes. Bum, curled up in the cage, draws thoughtless circles in the rough ground, and recalls tender moments when he could feel those calloused fingertips mimic the same patterns on his hips, and he nearly weeps with joy when he can distinguish the sound of the door opening. And it briefly occurs to him that he's been alone for hours, and everything had passed so quickly when his mind, nose and eyes were filled with nothing but Sangwoo. Bum can't stop himself from eagerly grinning as the footsteps approach, and he promptly lifts his chin, a wild grin exploding across his face as he presses his palms to the bars. He feels Sangwoo's palm pressed to the other side. He knows it's Sangwoo's hand, because when their pinkies brush, he can feel the subtle ridge in his bone where the knife perfectly fits, where once upon a time his bones were shattered and never quite healed right. It's such a simple touch, and yet it's the most excited he's been since he first saw the sunlight shining in Sangwoo's laughter. Bum aches to see his sunlight again, to live in his radiance and bathe in his light. He lived for Sangwoo's sunshine, and he could die for Sangwoo's darkness that hid his insecurities and made him more humbled by the moonlight in his fingertips. Fingertips that grace his cheeks and dance along the scuffed surface of his face to slip under the blindfold and ease it down. The dusk of the basement concealed Sangwoo's body on the left side, and it creeped along his chest like spirit limbs that desired to devour him. His right side was illuminated by a distant light from up the stairs, and Bum could have sworn that for the days that he had been locked up, that Sangwoo's cross image of the Grim Reaper's delicacy is all he could have ever desired. Bum can feel his eyes daringly leak, and scars run down his cheeks as he slips his fingertips through the thin gaps of the bars and intertwine them with Sangwoo's. You've been bad, Bummy. I know, I'm sorry, please. I miss you. Sangwoo hums, his breath a melody against the quiet, pressing his forehead to the cage and peering into the dark, brilliant eyes cutting through the umbra. I have something for you. Bum can't help but fidget with excitement, and he pulls his hand upward to graze his fingertips against Sangwoo's cheek, reveling in the soft surface. You did, even though I've been bad. Yes? Sangwoo begins, his breath haughty and full of embers that burn Bum's skin. Even though you've been bad, it's because Sangwoo pauses, and flicks his tongue across his lips in jaded contemplation. Bum's cheek flushed a dusty rose. I think this gift will inspire you to be better. Sangwoo covers up, flashing a haunted smile at Bum, shifting away from deft fingers and pressing his index finger to his lips in a silent hush. Let me go get it. And just as swift as he arrived, Sangwoo was ascending up the stairs with a soft glow illuminating his strong structure. Bum notices the faint hint of red creeping up the back of Sangwoo's shirt, and an electric burst of fear surges through his body, and he wonders how a man with death following his footsteps can look so angelic with the beaming rays of delicate light dancing across his shoulders. And when Sangwoo turns to flash a dazzling smile back at Bum, he can't help but cling to the bars of the cage to keep himself up. Minutes pass, and he can hear the distant sounds of screaming, and soon followed suit with the image of Sangwoo cradling a woman in his arms. Bum's eyes adjust to the new figure in Sangwoo's arms, and his eyes stay widened in horror as he watches Sangwoo grab his baseball bat from the top of the stairs. It all happens so fast. Bum hardly has time to watch the motion, and sheer visual of Sangwoo throwing this woman upward as if she were nothing, and effortlessly swinging the bat with great zeal so it connects with her skull, and smashes it against the wall. Bum can make out the distinct crackle of shattering, and the toppling of her still squirming body down the stairs and Sangwoo's heavy footsteps. Her shrieks never cease, and the subtle growl of annoyance emitting from Sangwoo displays his disdain of her wailing, and Bum can make out the soft scoff of pathetic slip from the younger male. Her wails fade into soft whimpers, and the click of the cage allows for Bum to crawl out. Sangwoo positions himself across the body from Bum, and he beckons him closer, to which he gladly complies. Sangwoo's touch ghosts along the curve of his jaw, and soon he's beckoning Bum over and kissing over the horrified body of the female separating them. Pearls of sweat form in the trenches of bone in Bum's spine, and along the circumference of his ribs. Sangwoo's hands never stop slipping over Bum's body, fingers sliding under the fabric of his undergarments and giving a needy squeeze to Bum's behind. He only stops when the girl cries out again and attempts to move and run, only for Sangwoo's free hand to crush her ribs down and trap her, moving to straddle her hips as he shoves Bum away. Why? Why me? She sobs out between choked breath, and Sangwoo only rolls his hips down onto her bare figure. She wails at the fabric of his clothed arousal brushing against her, and he scoffs. The only thing more natural than sex is death, he comments softly, his voice a rivulet of honey and as deep as the ocean. And human nature begs me to complete the cycle. We create life, and we end it. Your time's just here a little early, he whispers, as he soothes her with a brush of his knuckles to her shoulder. You will go honestly. You can tell me your deepest secrets, and I will never tell another human. You are safe with me. She reaches up a feeble hand to dig her nails into Sangwoo's chest, cries wrecking her body as he grips the knife lingering in his toolbox, and he presses the finely carved wood surface against her breast. He lets out a low moan, fingers dancing along the handle as he feels the souls he has taken with a single stroke living within the wood, like termites with teeth latched on tight. Can you feel that? He mutters, wisps of breath slipping from between his teeth. Feel what? She inquires, her sobs stifling as he steals a forlorn glance at Bum, and vaguely soothed yet all the same terrified of Sangwoo's hips pressed flush against her abdomen. Sangwoo simply grins, and shifts the blade in his hand as he draws long, thin lines of blood down her sternum. You're being honest. For the first time in your life, you're free from the parasitic existence that you have created. You're a disgusting, low-life slut. Did you sleep with me just because you only care for my looks? He pauses, and draws circles into her abdomen with the blade, her body writhing under him as she screams until her throat is raw. I hate women like you, who only marry for looks. You didn't care about who I was or what I did. You let your disgusting body tell you what to do, and now you're here, and you've proven to me that you're nothing but a Neanderthal guided by your own sexual desires. It's vile. Bum simply watches this interaction, face pallid with his knuckles freezing a blinding white that only paper can obtain with his state of clenching. The dust of the basement seems to be magnetized to his nose, and the scent of metal greets him with grasping hands. He pushes his sweat-slicked hair back and breathes raggedly through his nose as he watches the insistent teasing of the girl, whose breath was laboured due to the weight of Sangwoo bearing down on her hips. Bum is disgusted with his own infatuation, mesmerised by the firm diligence in Sangwoo, and the nagging in the back of his head tells him to stop, because he knows this is what Sangwoo wanted. He tries to fight against his own desire, his primal urge to kiss Sangwoo over the writhing woman's body, and to show her who he belonged to. But he restrains himself, because something about the way that Sangwoo is fondling the hilt of his knife as if it were his favourite line in a song sent shivers of terror racing through every nerve of Bum's body. Even Bum cannot depress the yelp of horror as Sangwoo plunges the knife into the woman's throat, right under the bottom of her jaw at such an angle that it presses into the delicate curve of the base of her skull, not quite severing the spinal cord, tilting his head back and humming out a low groan of satisfaction as blood spots against his hand. The woman is going hazy under Sangwoo, her head faintly dented where the bat had connected, and now the spray of blood erupting from her throat as Sangwoo slices a gash, only to remove the knife and work his fingers into her flesh. Bum swears that her eyes swell up in their sockets, straining against her eyelids from the pressure of blood threatening to pop them out. But Sangwoo is insistent, and his fingers mercilessly dig deep into her neck until he can feel the end of her tongue. And soon his knuckles are shielded in the gash in her neck. The muscles in Sangwoo's bicep ripple as he gives a swift tug, just strong enough to rip apart the muscles holding her tongue in place. He pulls once more. Thick fluids of saliva, bile, tears, and blood mix in the woman's mouth, Sangwoo's fingers silencing any noises other than choked gurgles. One more pull and a grunt from the younger male, and her tongue is ripped from her body and is left limp in Sangwoo's hand, his fingers curled and ghosting along the taste buds lining the end of it. She's dead in a matter of seconds, and it's the same span of time it takes for acid to expel past Bum's lips as his vomit coats his knees and splashes against the concrete. Filled with nothing but pure scorching acid from the lack of food he had been provided, Bum cannot stop the gagging and tears sliding down his face, hanging his head in shame and fear of what he could see if he looked up. Keeping his head down didn't save him from the pool of blood slipping inches away from his fingertips. He can't help but slip into a panic, and he slides frantically away from the blood, the sound of Sangwoo panting and growling distant in his ears. Sangwoo's noises are too tempting, and Bum's curiosity gets the better of him. He lifts his gaze and he can feel the vomit rising in his chest once more when he sees Sangwoo sliding his bloody hands across his defined hips. Jaws slack as a symphony of heavy exhales escape from his nose in a primitive manner. Bliss is ephemeral, as the scent of bile mingles with the fragrance of blood. Sangwoo only barks out a laughter of amusement, and soon he's sliding his tainted palm across the blooded knife, whispering something inaudible before he flips it in his grip and twists the blade into the corpse, carelessly shifting the knife around in her abdomen before drawing a long stroke down to her pelvis, and he wasted no time in placing the knife to the side and prying open her body with his hands. Bulging intestines swell up from the incision. Sangwoo's hands shamelessly sift through the long ribbons of organs, fingertips occasionally carving crescents into the distant ghost throbbing that used to pulse in the useless organs. His dark gaze is casted over to Bum, and Sangwoo offers a wide grin at the sight of vomit smearing his knees and traces of it dribbling down his chin with his tears. Sangwoo gestures Bum over, who skittishly obeys and crawls through the blood brushing across his shins. Before Bum can speak, soft lips are pressed to his forehead and he can feel Sangwoo's smile imprinting into his memory. "She's gone, Bummy, no need to cry. I've gotten rid of the vermin. I'm here." Sangwoo. Sangwoo. Bum chokes out, reluctant to press his cheek to Sangwoo's chest with mottled colours of flesh and red. He caves, though, and sobs against the comfort of Sangwoo's embrace. He's further pushed against him when a shiver races up his spine at a keen sensation of something soft pressing against his spine. It was warm, and it had a bizarre firmness in what he could clearly feel were sections. He doesn't need to look at it to know what it was, and the mere reality that Sangwoo was smearing intestines over his spine was enough for him to pass out against the sturdy surface of Sangwoo's chest. The last thing he remembers is Sangwoo's tender hands dropping the organs and rubbing calloused fingers in the dips of his vertebrae. "Sleep sweet, Bummy."